me open this here so I could see if my audio is good. See if it's okay. Okay. Perfect. All right. I don't know why this feels so awkward right now. Okay. I guess I'm really bad at doing this. Okay, so hello everyone. This is a surprise stream, I suppose. But actually, the purpose of this video stream thing is not for clout or money or whatever. This is actually a video I'm making for my team about a particular tool that we use for Source Filmmaker, which is called the Master Session Template. And the master, so what this is that it's basically a tool that our team uses. This tool is just, it's an extremely powerful tool that has that you can see on your screen right now, has global illumination, an anamorphic camera lens, custom SFM blooms. In fact, let me put that as the sort of showcase here so we can see that. If I can remember how I set this up. Disable this and this. And let me see. We want the flares test. And we want to enable the let's do this. Let's just do them all. Fuck it. And I want to disable some lights here. I guess this is not the best showcase of this with this particular skybox. Yeah, I should have had this kind of prepared. Wow, this is so laggy. That's crazy, man. Did this apply? We'll just apply it again. Okay. So. Not the, okay, but anyway. Where was I? I was trying to say, okay, so the tool, right? This tool, the Master Session Template, is just a tool that our team uses for, man, why is this so slow? Is that because my computer is also streaming at the same time? That's crazy, man. That's bananas. I hope it's not this slow. Anyway, I'll just let this rock. Okay. Man, I wish I could start this over, but that's it. This is it. So, okay. Yeah, so this is a tool that our team uses, and it has those capabilities. So global illumination, anamorphic camera lens, lens flare, custom SFM bloom. So for people that use SFM, they know that SFM can only do the shitty bloom that it comes with. But it turns out that that's not actually the case. Turns out you can make your own specific custom bloom, so to speak, inside the engine. Anyway, so there's a lot of powerful things inside the Master Session Template, and so yeah, that's why. So that's what this is all about. It's about this thing. So okay, what is the exact history or reason for why I'm even making this video, so to speak, or why this Master Session Template exists? To give some brief history, is that originally it started out as a tool that I was using for my own personal reason, because I was making stuff, and there were these setups that I wanted to do, but it started to get to a point where, to create all the things that I needed for a particular scene or whatever, it took too long to actually create the things that I needed, as the tools got more and bigger, more complex and stuff like that. So that's kind of, how it started out, how everything sort of began. Wow, I'm going to mute this music. It's way too loud. Jesus. Okay, so that's how it kind of started out, was through my own personal reasons, and then as time sort of went along, the master session template got more and more complicated, if that makes sense. Like it got more stuff was being added to it, and the tools were getting more elaborate, and it became impractical to sort of, to have it without, like making it every session. And then the tools actually started to get really good in terms of value. They were providing a lot of value at some point, sometime early in late 2021 or early 2022 or something like that. And so it was at that point, or it was something like 7 or 8 months ago, where the tools were just so good that we started putting it out to the team, organizing it in a certain way and putting it out into the team to use. And that leads to kind of where it is today, which is just this powerhouse of just one-stop shop sort of thing that people can just use to make whatever they want and stuff like that. With the power, like I was mentioning, behind those tools and shit. Anyway, so based on this history, right? The way that, based on that stuff, right, that information, the way that the master session template ended up being organized and being how it's supposed to be used is basically through that initial concept of how I was personally using it, which was I had setups I wanted to make, but I didn't want to make them all the time. So basically the master session template is this thing that you open up, right? And all the things that you need are already set up for you. That's kind of the whole idea behind it. And so basically, we hashed out that system, and then so everything is set up to basically already be finished and done for you. So this got to the point where it was like, okay, with global illumination, all the lighting is done for you. With camera setups, you don't have to set up anything crazy. You just boom, you have your camera, it's ready. Camera, particular setup. Another thing was scene building, you open up your session, you kind of just want to get started scene building. You don't want to spend time doing shit. So that's the whole sort of way the session is constructed. And if you look at how it's constructed here, I'm going to go over the installation settings before even talking about this, but basically when you see it, it'll open up with camera settings, camera setups, light setups, environment setups, and this thing called references. So that's how everything is set up. You start out with your camera, you pick the camera you want to choose, so one of these three or whatever. Then you go into your lights, you pick which light setups you need to have access to. And then you go into your environment tools, you start pulling those out, and then you start building. So it's supposed to be a very easy 1, 2, 3 type of thing. And then as you're making the scene build, you are pulling from the tools that you need. You pretty much don't go back into lighting. If you're using global illumination, you don't really have to go back and forth with the lighting. You don't have to do any lighting pretty much. Yes, you do, for stylistic purposes, but for the most part, the systems do all that stuff for you. And then what's left is that the master session template is supposed to give you the power to sort of just spending less time thinking about how to do something. No, less time how to do something technically, right? and more time creatively, you know, thinking about things conceptually, like how do I want this to look? You know, what kind of flavor am I going for? What kind of concept am I trying to chase? What thing do I want to build today? You know, that's the kind of like concept. That's the kind of thinking that the master session template is supposed to adhere to, and less time spending on technical stuff, you know, so that you're not fiddling around with this light, or you're not fiddling around with looking for models, you know, like that's the whole intuition behind the master session template and why it's become such a kind of this thing. Um, so anyway, so that was just a little introduction to everything. And by the way, this whole video is going to be timestamped. Again, this is a tutorial for my team about how this thing is supposed to work. So that, oh, and I also found that as I was sharing this to my team, you know, I was explaining it over and over and over again. So that's why I'm now making this tutorial. It's gotten to a point where it's like there's a lot of shit in this thing, and it's getting pretty crazy to explain it over and over again. And it's probably a pain in the ass for them to remember all the shit that's behind it. So this tutorial is going to act as a sort of one-stop shop for them to go, for everyone to go and just, you know, if they want to know a little bit more about how to use something, they can go to that particular moment in this video, and then just be like, you know, if you need to understand how the bloom camera works, you go to the bloom camera section. It's a short little tutorial about how that works, and then you gain that knowledge and all the little caveats and stuff. And that's what this video is going to be about, is going into the very details of all the things so that you know how to use it properly and stuff like that. So to start this video off, we're going to start with the installation section. So when you download this thing, you're going to it's going to come with 4 files. Let me see if I can pull that up here. Is this it? So it's going to come with 4 files. Well, it's going to be 2 files that you download, right? So it's going to be 2 zip files. You're going to get a master session template, and it's followed by the date. So 03/30/23 is today's date. That's the date of this particular update. And then you have the tools zip, which contains all the material, like these are like material files pretty much, that are needed for all this stuff to work. In the tools folder, you'll find these 3 folders here called tools illumination _system, tools _projection system, and tools _scene build system. So it's these 3 folders here. And the way you're supposed to treat all these files are like mods, pretty much. So if you were to go to your user mod, your SFM location, let's see if I can do that here. So Steam apps, common, Source Filmmaker, game, right? And here in Source Filmmaker game, you have all your mods that are listed here. You're just going to take these 3 folders and boom, you're going to drag and drop them right here. I can actually drag and drop these and nothing bad will happen, but I don't want to do that. Oh, it decided to move them anyway. Fuck it. Okay. Oh, no, cancel. Oh, God. What did I do? Okay, let's just undo the last 2 things that I just did. Okay, so hopefully I didn't ruin. Okay, what you want to actually do is you don't want to drag them into other folders. You want to drag them into into your game directory. So I should try to do that properly. Let's in fact do that properly. I hope I don't delete anything important. So running through this with you guys right now live. So there you go. I just dragged everything. Hopefully I didn't make any stupid mistakes. But yeah, that's how you're supposed to do it, is you're just dragging these 3 things into here. And now something to keep in mind is that if you have old systems, and there you'll see them here, right, like this. You're going to do the same thing with the master session template, which will open up with this folder, master session template 03/23. So you just drag and you drop that. It's just like a mod. and it'll appear right there. So it'll appear for me right here. And what you want to do in order to activate everything, you want to go to your gameinfo.txt, which should be located in your usermod folder. So you're going to double click on that, and you're going to go to the top of your search paths list, and you're going to add these extensions here, right? So you have all these extensions. I'm going to change this extension here for me to 033023, and I'm going to save. And so yeah, these 4 extensions here is what you want to put into your game info. Make sure everything is spelled correctly, that they match your folders. And anyway, so why you need to install these 4 things, this will make a lot more sense later about how these folders are constructed. And I'll kind of go more in depth about how they're I guess I can do that now, but basically the way that they're constructed, right? So SFM, the way that it works pretty much on a fundamental level is through search paths. And so for anyone that's done any material overriding business, right? So, you have a long sphere, whatever, right? Usually you go into your materials, right? And then if you wanted to do something, right, like say add something, right, you have to do this sort of procedure where you type models / some guy's name and then / some other folder and then whatever. So you end up typing all these things that you have to look up and remember, and it can get pretty complicated. So what this system basically has done is it's gotten rid of all that fluff, so to speak, and everything's placed in such a way where all you have to do is just type in the word, and no search paths. It's just you type in the word, and this will make more sense, or you'll see the power of such a thing when you go in and you access some of these tools. Like for example, there's this tool. I'll just show you real quick. You can see here, it's just base texture is white, like metal, and it will change the texture to something metal. So actually, just so you can see that on screen, and I'm going to disable my bloom stuff real quick so you can actually see. It's a little bit laggy, so there you go. I don't know if you can see this. Oh, I'll just show it right here. You see this? This is the texture, right, to the thing. So I can go in to this cube here, and I can type in, so something like metal, you can type in cabin. That'll give you a little cabin texture. So I don't know if you saw the texture over here change, but that's cabin. Logs, right? That gives you another thing. What else? What's another thing that I can remember? Teak, right? That's another one. Gives you some wood planks. Ice is one. There's a bunch. So there's a bunch of things, and these are all hooked up into that system, and it takes advantage of that fact of how SFM handles its search paths, so that you don't have to type in all types of shit. So that's something very important to know about how all this stuff works. So anyway, that's the installation process, which was just you take those folders, you put them into /game, and then you make sure your gameinfo.txt has those names of the files. You save your game info, whoops, and you close it up. And yeah, so you should be ready. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to close this. Well, I can save it. I'm going to close it, and I'm going to open up the session. So this is the startup procedure on what you do when you start up the session after you've installed it. So click continue. I'm going to open up now so yeah, you go to open. What you're going to do is you're going to look for, let's see, it should be, here it is, master session template 0330. You're going to go into your elements, your sessions, and there it should be there for you. And hopefully this thing works. I haven't actually tested it yet. So you let it load. Cancel that. So yeah, this is your startup procedure. Now, when you start this up, what you're going to see is you're going to see things are going to look a little funny. It'll look like, you got some, all types of stuff going on everywhere. What's a required download is the directional, what's it called? Directional scaling patch, the scaling script, the directional scaling script that just kind of came out a couple weeks ago. You have to have that downloaded in order for this new update to work properly. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to your scripts, UMFC, and you're going to hit the directional scale patch. It'll tell you successfully patched, and you'll see all the stuff will go to normal. Everything will change to a normal thing. And so now the next thing that you want to do in order to properly use the session, right? So I'm going to disable my simple terrain. What you'll notice is that there's no floor here. This session actually loads by default on the mirror map. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to Draw Game Entities, enable your brush models, and then disable your brush models, or something like that. Or just enable them, I guess. Yeah, just enable them, whatever. Anyway, that's the mirror on the floor to get it to work. And now you can see she has reflection from the mirror map. The mirror map is there for you to have, let me just drink some of this. Yeah, the mirror map is there so that you have just nice reflections on your floors, if you're doing an interior scene build or something. But yeah, anyway, that's the startup procedure. It's very simple. And now what you're going to see when you go into your session, obviously, is what you just saw before, which was you're going to see a desert with a character in the middle and 2 cubes and some fog and stuff. The reason this is like this is it's supposed to be sort of it's your template session, make it like cozy for you. You don't have to have this particular character here. Now I use it for particular reasons as the default, but you might have a different reason for why you want your default stuff to be immediately presented to you on the screen. Yeah, so this is where, so in this thing, what you can tell is that there's fog going on and that there's the Fong that you can see and the global illumination, you can see it hitting the sphere behind her. So those are all things that you're immediately presented with when you open up your session. Again, you can take these models and do whatever you want. You can also disable your references, right? So these are now located in references, this reference group here. So you can just disable that stuff, and then you can just get immediately to start scene building. I'm gonna actually mute that stuff, or not. Yeah, let's do that. Anyway, so enabling it back on. Anyway, you're gonna see. So the first sort of thing here is you're gonna see these 3 groups, right? So you have your camera setups, your light setups, your environment setups, and your references, of course. So the camera setup, so like I mentioned earlier, the way that these things are built, so to speak, is you pick your camera thing that you want to use, you pick the light setup you want to use, you pick and then you start using your tools to build your scene build and do your animations and stuff. So everything it's very much a top-down sort of process where you're just picking things. So you're enabling things in terms of visibility, and you're disabling things that you're not using. So you're enabling stuff that you're using, you're disabling stuff you're not using. So to start with the cameras, right? Going from the top down, right? So the standard camera is the first thing. So every setup has, the groups that tell you what thing, the little groups for their particular, of that particular tool. So the first tool is the standard camera. And this is exactly how it sounds. It's just a regular old standard camera. And you use this to do, if you don't want any fancy camera stuff, aside from a few other things, then this is the camera that you will use, right, as your main camera, as your scene camera, so to speak. Now, typically, the way that I sort of organize things is like, this is your camera that, like, if you're using the standard camera, right, this is the camera that you use to actually film the thing, you know, so it's going to be the camera you use on export. Why? Because there's a bunch of things that are connected to it, and so if you're not using any of these other systems, right, but you're using these that are disabled, then, you know, you're going to, you know, these things are attached to this camera here. So that's why you want to use it as the export camera if you have these things that are attached to it enabled, right? But if you want to just use a different camera, you just copy it and then you paste it. And then this is now the camera that you use to work and move around. And, you know, maybe you want to get a different angle and you want to test out other angles or fly around the map a little bit. You can do that. Sometimes what I like to do is I like to set it up as a work camera. So you can actually call it a work camera. And this is the thing that you're going to reference. And therefore you can just minimize this. And now there's nothing that's following this particular work camera. So anyway, I'm going to delete that for now. After I swap back to this. So what's attached to this camera, this standard camera? There's two things that are attached. The first thing is this thing called fog on camera, which is this new fog system that I recently made. And so let me, just to show off what it does. It is a 360 fog sort of method. So you'll see, so this fog thing, right, it's actually attached to the standard camera. So if I were to fly around, you'll notice that I can sort of, you see there's fog everywhere, you know, it's all around. So the clever part is that the way that this works is if you zoom out, it's actually just fog coming from the perspective of this camera. And it's actually pretty cool. It also uses this, this gobo to do this effect. So anyway, it's just a new tech. It's one of these new techniques that are pretty cool to use. It's off by default because it's not the best method of doing fog in this particular master session template. The default fog that you want to use is this thing called global fog, and we're going to talk about it later when we talk about global illumination. But in the event that you don't have this global illumination on, then the fog on camera is going to be the thing that you're probably going to use instead. And then if you don't want to use that, then make your own fucking fog. So yeah, that's what the fog on camera does. What you're going to do if you want to change it. So let's just preview what it looks like. Cool thing about the fog stuff is that the volumetric, so the first thing is that there's no shadows enabled, so it takes up no computational resources. But what you can also do is, or what the volumetrics actually do is they shimmy out based on depth of field, I guess, or they just, it's on some kind of default sort of thing in which they're actually moving. Hard to explain how the volumetric thing actually works. Maybe someone smarter than me who actually knows how it works can actually explain why it can radiuses itself out without radius actually being on. But what you can do because of that sort of feature is that you can actually adjust the minimum distance here to push it back if you want, and you can up the radius a little, and it will it'll do something a little kind of funny, but it'll actually push the fog back and give you a sort of fall off there. Let me see how big this is. 1,000. Okay, so you can make this pretty big, and it'll fall off pretty. The more radius you have, the more it'll fall off gradually as it gets closer. And you obviously, you know, you want to use the min distance to just put it where you need to put it. And let's just see what it looks like. So yeah, there you go. And that's your fog on camera, so to speak, or pretty much all you want to do with it. Things that you don't want to do, things you don't want to touch about it, is you don't want to really change this gobo. You can, right? You can change it to something like white, and it'll give you a, let's just turn down this volumetric here, and this will give you just a solid sort of wall of fog. So you can look at this here. So yeah, if you're looking for something more like a bog, you know, or whatever, like England or something, then you can use white as the texture. But fog is the thing that actually has the horizon-based fog, which will gradually which will gradually fall off as you aim towards the sky, as this guy here. Now, one thing to mention, one of its limitations, is that it's biased towards the is that it's kind of biased in some sense to the camera's perspective. So you've got you know, it'll kind of fall off. Now, the fall off is pretty, you won't really notice the bias unless you're doing something like this, where you can kind of tell that it's falling off between these two things here. Or if you're going lower, you'll see there's less, it's less bright over there. But anyway, that's just something to mention about its limitations. Anyway, moving away from the fog on camera, the next sort of thing about this whole stuff is the fill light on camera, which is another sort of technique. These are similar techniques, so based on the same kind of tech. So the fill light on camera here, there's two kinds. Now, by default, so I'll just repeat this again. By default, these things that are attached to this standard camera are off. So you only want to use these in the event that you're not using global illumination. Or if you have your own sort of fill lighting methods that you prefer. But in most cases, or at least the reason you want to use fill lights on camera is because it's conducive to working on big productions. Now, is the fill light on camera perfect? No, it's not absolutely perfect. It's just a pretty good approximation to a fill light. And there's three kinds. So there's the way that this works is that it's a plane that is stretched as big like this. It radiuses itself out, and it ends up surrounding the. It ends up casting light from the directions surrounding her. Why that is based on mathematics, but you can still tell. You know, you can actually see based on the shadows that there are shadows going in two different directions here. So you can see like that the reason those shadows occur is because the brightest points of the light are actually on the edges of the thing here. And you can alter that sort of fall off by turning down the constant to 10 and doing something like quadratic instead. But I suggest not to do that. Anyway, your fill light on camera is the thing you want to use if you really don't have any, if you really can't use your global illumination. And it's better than using some other fill light method that will take you a lot longer to make. Say if you have 50 shots, you don't want to continually make new fill lights for each one. You want to make sure that your fill lighting is basically the same throughout your whole thing, and not just and you know, not something that's based just off of its off of each camera's sort of thing. Perspective, I guess you could say. So anyway, there's this, so that's one method. It's called the standard method, fill light method. There's actually a better one called the half sphere method, which is a more advanced version of the fill light on camera. And how it works is a little bit, it basically approximates better a sphere instead of a plane. And now you can also see based on the sphere behind her that this is not a perfect method either. You can do things like, you know, using quadratic to alter stuff. But anyway, anyway, it's kind of pretty much the same tactic as the fill light on camera. It's just, it's meant to approximate a half sphere, which is why it's called half sphere. Again, the thing that you want to actually mess around with is just the intensities of these lights, which you really these lights use something you don't really touch. You know, just the intensity is pretty much it. You don't want to move the position or whatever. You can also use it as a work camera. So, I mean, like a work light, so to speak. So if you have no lights going on and you don't have your global illumination set up, this is like, it's a good way to sort of create just some light for you to work with. Same thing with this thing here. And now you have some light and you can just make stuff, and that's where your fill light on camera does some work for you. Anyway, all four of them being on is probably the best if you're going to be using them over global illumination. But anyway, the point is that you don't really want to use these until you have no choice, so to speak. So anyway, so that's what the standard camera is, and that's the things that are connected to it. And moving from the standard camera, which is pretty self-explanatory, you now have your anamorphic camera. So let me just explain exactly what I'm doing here. So when you want to use a camera, you enable these groups, right? So I'm disabling it. When I disable it, it means that I don't want to use it anymore. And when I enable something else, that means now I'm using this particular camera. It is the same story for the Bloom camera, but there's another thing that I'll get to later about it. But that's generally how all these systems work, is you enable what you want to use, you disable what you don't want to use. So anyway, now I enabled my anamorphic camera, which is on. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this RT camera anamorphic to the scene. I'm also going to enable my lighting here so you can see what's going on. And now this RT camera, right, what this does is that it controls the camera of this controls what you see. And it's hooked up to a bunch of stuff in here. And the anamorphic camera is actually what you see, right, in exporting. Or not exporting, but previewing. One of the changes that was made was that you no longer need an overlay to enable and disable in order to see the thing. Give me 1 second. Can I actually pause this real quick? No, I can't pause it. I guess I can mute this. Hold on. All right, so where was I? All right, so you have this anamorphic camera, and what it does is, so the RT camera controls what's inside of the scene, and the anamorphic camera, it controls what you get to preview, what's actually previewed. So what you're actually doing is you're using this RT camera to navigate around like so, and the anamorphic camera will sort of follow you around and produce the image that you are looking for. So now one of the reasons you want to use an anamorphic camera, there's a couple reasons. So where to start? Basically, the first thing is that an anamorphic camera, if you notice, I'm going to take this cube here, I'm going to extend it in the Z direction. So if you notice with this camera is that if you look at the sides here, you'll notice that it's this straight thing is actually bowing outwards. And that's actually a feature of real cameras called distortion. I forgot the exact name now, but this is like basically lens distortion. That's what it's called. And straight lines will essentially bend as it goes closer to the edge of the screen. And this is like a key feature of cameras and why they're one of the reasons they look so good in comparison to video game cameras, which are always rectilinear and shoot things in rectilinear projection and shoot things in straight lines. Now, going to go back. And now one of the new updates here, aside from the fact that you don't have to press the overlay all the time, is that this thing now has anamorphic bokehs as well, courtesy of Anonymous Gamer's Bokeh tool. So how that works is basically you take your RT camera and you just pump up the aperture, right, to get that blurriness going. And if you give it a moment here, it'll start blurring stuff. Right, so there you can see the blurring. What I'm going to do is I'm going to enable this flares and bokeh test here. And I'm going to, like this, that's fixed to there. And now what we should see is, there we go. Let me turn off the flares. And this is where you'll see the bokehs here are actually not horizontal, which is SFM's default horizontal bokeh. This is vertical bokeh, which is what an anamorphic camera would produce. Why that occurs, there's actually two things that contribute. The first thing is that this anamorphic camera itself changes the horizontal bokeh of SFM, SFM's default bokeh, into spheres, so spherical bokeh. So if I were to turn off the bokeh helpers here, you'll notice that these are actually spheres. So you can see they're actually spherical. And obviously, if you looked at our RT camera, you'd notice. So here, I'll just let you guys notice this. You see, these are horizontal bokehs. And so, yeah, so that's why they'll look horizontal. The anamorphic camera will make those horizontals into spheres. And then with the helper tool, with the bokeh helper tool and the vertical bokeh tool, that'll turn those spheres into vertical bokehs. If you're wondering why they're two different tools to do that, it's a little complicated. Basically, it has to do with resolution and some other stuff. But anyway, so yeah, so all those things work together to give you this vertical bokeh. So yeah, the anamorphic camera supports that. By the way, if you're wondering, the RT camera, or whatever. Oh, yeah. So there's a fill light on camera on this one as well. It's off by default. Again, it's on there for the same reason as the other fill lights on cameras. If you're not using global illumination, then those will be, so then that's the thing that you'd want to use to do fill lighting. Anyway, so okay, now that the bokeh is, so that's bokeh, right? Now what you want to do, let me turn this tone map scale down a bit. So the next thing that the anamorphic camera produces is these blooms. So there's actually 3 different kinds of blooms for the anamorphic camera. There's the regular bloom, which we can see here. Let's see what it looks like. So that's what it looks like. If you let it load, it'll smother itself out a bit. So the other 2 blooms are the blue flares, which we'll look at real quick. And you can see the blue flaring there. And the next thing is the chromatic flares. Now the blooming is supposed to be a very subtle effect. You don't want to blast this on. You don't want to blast these. There's a couple bugs that you should be aware of. You can't use all of if you use all of them, it looks very pretty, but the more that you stack on, the more brightness that occurs. And if it becomes too bright, you're going to start seeing a grid-like pattern appear. This grid pattern, not exactly sure where it comes from, but basically the way you avoid that is, you don't want to put too much stuff onto the thing. You don't want to put too much stuff everywhere. So let me disable these real quick. Okay, let me enable the blue flares. So basically, the way you want to typically control the flare is 2 things, which is you want to either increase the brightness of objects or you want to adjust the tone map scale. I would suggest not adjusting the tone map scale, just use brighter objects. And And the reason is because of, well, first, you know, you don't want to blow out everything. You could if you want to blow stuff out. But as you go too bright, you'll see, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a grid-like pattern that starts to appear. So you can't go overboard. So everything's kind of been calibrated to this default setting. So everything is supposed to look perfect on these default settings so that you don't have to change anything, pretty much. Again, I made that for my sort of purpose. But yeah, so you don't really want to change too much about all these setups. You just enable what you want, you disable what you don't want. The thing that you need to keep in mind is that if you want to change the FOV of your camera, right? So let's just pretend I'm over here. Oh, there's no skybox, that's right. Let's just pretend I'm over here, right? Looking at the scene. I got my anamorphic camera looking, so let me just put it here. So let's say I want to change the FOV to something like, well, let's just say I want to change the FOV. What's going to actually happen, oops, sorry, you want to change the FOV of your RT camera, not your anamorphic camera. So as you zoom in and out, right, what's going to happen is your bloom is going to start misaligning. And the reason that happens is, I'm not going to explain why it happens, but what you want to do in order to avoid this misalignment is you want to be working in just decimals, like even decimals like this. So 0.1 FOV, right? 0.2 FOV, 0.3 FOV, and so on, right? Once you're satisfied with a particular FOV, then what you're going to do is you're going to go over to this thing called the Bloom FOV table, which will come with the stuff you downloaded. And this will tell you exactly, you know, if you were on 0.4 FOV of your camera, then this is the FOV that you want your bloom to have. And these values will change depending on if you're using 1080p SFM or 4K SFM. So 0.336 is the FOV, that you want to use. So you're going to go to your blue flares here, and you're just going to change the horizontal FOV to 0.336. So I'm just pasting in those values. And you'll notice now the bloom is now aligned, and you'll see it here. There you go. So there's your bloom. It's now aligned. So that's how you sort of use this camera. Using the blooms on the camera. So when you want to adjust your FOV, just make sure you're working in those even decimal things to the table, and you'll be able to have your sexy blooms or whatever. One thing to note, or one thing to be aware of, is that when you what's it called? When you have a trying to think, there is something to keep in mind here. I could just remember. What was it? Man, I can't really remember what it was. Anyway, so I'm going to just control undo so I can go back to the default position. There we go. So let me think. Trying to remember what it was that I was trying to remember. Anyway, that's how you use your blooms, is just like that. So that covers the anamorphic camera, I believe. I hope that's everything. Oh yeah, that's right. So one thing to note about the anamorphic camera is that it works through an RT camera, and on 1080p SFM, the texture size of the render texture thing, that the way the system works, is 1024 by 1024, which is too low. So in order to export out in 1080p, you need to go to 4K SFM, right? So you need to have that 4K sort of thing in your launch commands. And that's how you get a 1080p 4K. I mean, yeah, that's how you get a 1080p export, because the texture will change to 2048 by 2048. So yeah, that's how you use your anamorphic camera, and all the caveats behind it. It's very simple in terms of how to actually practically use it. You just you take your RT camera, you position it where you want, you know, and then, you know, that's pretty much it. And then all the effects will do the work for you, you know. When you want to change FOV, right? So you just, you know, you change FOV. Just make sure that at the end of everything, right before, you know, when you need to align everything, make sure you apply it to all your flares or whatever that you're using for your shot. So, you know, if I decide, okay, I want this to be 0.4 FOV, just make sure you change your blooms to whatever. And then as you export, like when you go to export with 1080p, when you go to 4K SFM, just make sure that you use the values here instead, because they'll be misaligned when you go over to your 4K SFM. So there's two different things, two different value tables there. Anyway, so that's the anamorphic camera. It's now a fully anamorphic camera with the bokehs, with the flares, with everything. Also, one last thing to keep in mind about the flares is that they look best when there's no aperture on, which I think is supposed to happen, because the flares, they actually turn into bokehs when there's aperture on. So in my opinion, it looks better when there's no aperture and you just, you know, and you have the flares going. When you are blurring it, just turn off the blooms. You don't really need them. They kind of just make it look, you know, not too good. So I'm just going to actually show you an example of that by turning this up. Oh, by the way, make sure that the things that you leave alone, right? So try not to touch any of the, you know, don't touch the aperture on your anamorphic camera. Only do it to the RT camera. The anamorphic camera is not a real camera. It's like a thing. It's like a screen, you know, that's somewhere above the map. So anyway, other things you don't want to touch. You don't want to touch this anamorphic camera internal tools, right? You don't want to touch those. Just keep it enabled. Just leave it alone. Those are critical to how the thing actually can work. So yeah. Anyway, let me let this load. So as you can see here, right, the blue flares, they're on, right? And you can see the blue flares are actually radiusing out as well with the, not radiusing, they're just, the aperture is on. So they will sort of shimmy out as well. And yeah, maybe that effect is supposed to be correct. I don't know if that's a correct, truly effective thing. But I don't think it looks very good. I would just turn off the blue flares altogether. Maybe you want them on. I don't know what the actual realistic thing is supposed to be. But anyway, it's best when there is, the flares look their best when there is no aperture on. So you'd want to turn those off. Let your bokehs instead shine, your vertical bokehs, you know, let these things sort of shine on their own when you have your aperture up. So anyway, I'm going to turn that aperture down to default. Like I mentioned before, everything has sort of been calibrated to a default setting. So anyway, so the next thing is the bloom camera, which is the same thing as the anamorphic, right? But it's without any distortion. So it's just regular standard camera, but it's with bloom on it. So it's the same story. In order to activate it, right, what you need to do is you need to go show an element viewer camera. And then you're going to go up to the thing that says shot 1. And you're going to change your active monitor here to 1 instead of 0. And that'll now change the view to your bloom camera, I believe. I don't know. I don't see that happening actually. Oh, that's because I didn't disable this. So disable this and enable your bloom camera. So there you go. Now everything is is on this bloom camera without distortion. So it's just rectilinear rendering there. And now what this has is it has a let me just turn up the tone map scale so we can see these blooms a little bit better. So the white flares, okay, so there's the white bloom. So just like the other one, it has a radial sort of bloom that goes on. And you can see that effect there. The white flares, which is just a spin off of the blue flares, you know. So it'll have those two flares going out horizontally. Then you have the white star, which is pretty cool. That looks kind of neat. See what it looks like. Yeah, there's your star. As you can see, it's too bright here, so that's why you get this grid pattern in the background, which you don't want. And to do that, you need to sort of go back to regular tone map scale, which I'm going to do, in fact, because I don't trust. Don't ask me why that grid appears. I have no idea. Just a bug with RT cameras, and well, maybe not a bug, but doing crazy shit with SFM. Anyway, it doesn't happen when it's not too bright. So when it's not bright, it just doesn't happen. But when it's too bright, it just happens. Probably some kind of clipping thing that occurs. I don't know. Anyway, so this is the white star. And then it also has the chromatic colors. So you have chromatic stuff. Oh, by the way, what is chromatic? Chromatic is when it starts out blue, then it fades into green, and then it fades into red. So if you were to disable a lot of this light setup business, you can actually see the blue and red colors here with this bloom. They kind of all sort of mesh together, right? But you know, if you were to really pay attention, it's actually going from blue, bright bluish white, to green, to red, fading out into red. So that's what chromatic does. Anyway, so that's your bloom camera. Again, don't touch your bloom camera internal tools. Those are meant for the camera to operate. Just like the anamorphic camera, you use your RT camera to move around. Let's actually do that. Let's actually do that by taking this and going over here, maybe that. Okay. I don't know why I was doing that. Probably because I just pressed something dumb. Anyway, so this is so that's how the bloom camera works. You can see I use my RT to go and navigate. Now I can turn on my white flares or whatever I want. Turn on the white star. And that's how you use it. That's it. Again, it's the same story with the FOV. Just you go to the same values using this table. You go to 0.4 and then you change it to this number, or if you're going to 0.3 FOV, you know, you use these numbers use this number depending on if you got 1080p SFM going, or if you've got 4K going, then you use that other value on the other side. So anyway, that's your blooms. Here, let me turn on the other bloom here because I want to see that crispy sunlight. So there's your bloom coming in. I can actually make it, probably don't want to turn it up too much, but just to illustrate what it looks like if you can't see it on the other side. This is your custom blooming, okay? So yeah, there you go. So that's your SFM bloom. Don't go too crazy with the tone map scale. You know, do yourself a favor. You know, just keep things simple. Try not to use too many of these different flares either. Keep that simple. You know, white bloom and chromatic is pretty good combo. White flares and white bloom is a decent combo. What else? Just, you know, sometimes you just want flares and that's it. And just making them brighter. So anyway, so that's your blooming in SFM. I'm gonna go now to, so this is the default, right? Okay, I turn this stuff off. Let me switch this back to 0. So I'm on my anamorphic camera. I'm gonna disable this now. I'm gonna enable that. I'm gonna enable this. So now we're gonna get into light setups. So that's all the camera setups. By the way, this light probe thing, this is nothing special. It's just a light probe camera that you use to take panoramas. This is not panoramas, but nvmap things. This is sort of, it's just here. You could just make one. It doesn't really matter. It's just at the right FOV and stuff like that. I don't even know if that really matters either. So just it's there. It was there for just whatever, to make env maps. That's pretty much it. Which has pretty much been discontinued anyway. So anyway, those are your three camera setups. That's all you pretty much need, if anything. Your anamorphic and your bloom, depending on what project you're going for. Your standard if you don't want to do anything too crazy. Although it's not crazy, it's just So anyway, so light setups. In this next section, light setups. So let me just go to. I'm gonna actually disable this. Go to my standard camera. So in light setups, what we have. So by default, when you open up your session, global illumination is going to be on. And everything else, every other kind of setup is going to be off. And the reason is because you obviously you want to see it when you open the session to make sure that it works and stuff. But yeah, it's on because that's supposed to be what you're supposed to go to by default, and you want to make your scene builds around global illumination anyway. So anyway, how this thing works is so now this is where we're going to start introducing some of the things that we mentioned earlier about how the tools are set up when you installed things, about how the materials are set up, and also about how these more complicated systems are set up. So the reason that a lot of these things are like this, you can see there's a lot of locks on everything. It's because everything is sort of locked together. So let's just say you accidentally moved the skybox or whatever. Like, let's just say you were fucking around and you touched one of these things, right? And you saved and you don't remember. The problem, right? With you don't want to do that pretty much, because if you do that, you're gonna knock things out of alignment, and then it's gonna mess you up for the rest of the session. If you don't fix that alignment issue. Because when you move one thing, you might move something else, and so on and so forth. So the tool here, so all the tools are sort of connected by a singular sort of element here called an origin. So if you were to actually enable this origin, you would see that this origin is actually an image of the skybox itself. So when you rotate this origin, this actually controls the entire system. So as you rotate it around, you'll notice the skybox is also rotating around. And if you were to actually look at it with lights disabled, you can see that the skybox is actually aligned to this particular sphere in terms of where it's rotated. So this sphere actually tells you which direction your sun may be coming from. This is set up like other sort of things are set up in other games. Game engines and stuff, is so that what direction you're actually aiming things at. So anyway, this is by default aimed at like 0 or something. And this is what you want to use when you want to move the tools around. So if you want to move this tool, the global illumination, you always want to make sure that it sits at the base of the foot, not the base of the foot, on the subject. So you just want to make sure it's at the feet of your subject, wherever the camera is looking at. So basically where the ground starts. That's where you want your global illumination to always be positioned in space. So if your character was over here and your camera was looking over here, that's where you want your global illumination to be. And so yeah, so you can enable it. You can enable this to look at what you're doing, but then you can just disable it so that you don't have to look at it anymore. But just keep in mind, and you can also move it without, so you can see the whole thing is moving as I'm doing this. And also you can rotate it without without that sphere. And you can see that, that will happen. Anyway, so global illumination, right? So how does it work? So if I actually let this render, you'll actually see it on the character. But what this global illumination does is it produces reflections, produces shadows, directed shadows, as well as ambient occlusion, ambient lighting. It produces, what else? I said reflection, right? Reflections, ambient occlusion, ambient lighting, filled lighting. It produces pretty much everything, sun lighting. So it produces all of those things in this single light. So you can actually see if I turn off these other ones. Every light is off. This is the only light that's on. It produces all of this. So you can see that it's an extremely powerful sort of tool to use based on the fact that it can produce this stuff. You can see that the sun is actually coming in, hitting her from the side, giving that biased sort of lighting. One thing that the global illumination can't exactly do is produce sharp shadows. Not extremely sharp, but it will produce pretty decently sharp shadows. So yeah, that's what the global illumination does. Now you don't really want to change any of this stuff here. Everything has basically already been calibrated by myself to be the best sort of options, so to speak. So when you load in a character, basically you don't even want to touch the global illumination. All you got to do, right, is you go to your global illumination, or well, first thing that you're supposed to do is you go to your skybox, and you go to materials. So you go to show an element viewer model, and you go to your materials. You go to here, and here's where you type in the name of your skybox. So here it says clear. That's one thing, but you can type in things like day. That will change the skybox to day, right? You can also type in, whoopsie, you can type in night. This will give you a night sky. You can type in the names of clouds. So cumulus is the name of a cloud, and that will give you this cumulus cover here. You can type in stratus clouds, right? So stratus, and that will produce stratus clouds. Nimbus, right? Based off of cumulonimbus, things like that. So nimbus is another one. It's actually a storm if you want to look around. There's a storm in the background there. So that's a pretty cool skybox. You also got sunrise, sunset, things like this. There's a full sort of documentation on what the allowed values are that come with that download. Let me see if I can actually find it right now. Can't exactly remember. Oh, it's in the SFM directories. So if you were to go here into your tools illumination system folder, you'll find this document that says global illumination database. And then you just go to the bottom here and you'll see all the allowed base texture inputs for the skybox model. And you'll see every skybox that's listed. Everything that you can input into that field is listed there. But let me just give you the intuition for exactly how this whole system was designed. It's based on the whole AI thing, like the whole you give a prompt and it'll spit out a thing for you. It's based on the same premise. So, you think of something that's easy to remember. What kind of skybox are you looking for, right? Well, cloudy, right? Like, is that a thing you can input? And then, yes, it is, right? So you think of, there's easy things to remember, right? And then you just type it in. So if you want something, right? Let's just pretend you want, I don't know, overcast, right? Then you just type that in. If you have it, then you have it and it's there. Sunrise, sunset. So, covering as many sort of these basic primitive words as much as possible. And what else is there? Storm is another one. So, basically, that's the whole power of this sort of system built in with all this is it's easy to remember. You don't have to remember all this bullshit, model / this person's name / material / whatever. Because that can get pretty annoying to deal with. And so anyway, that's why you just have these simple words. I actually changed these to textures, which is pretty funny. All the systems are actually connected together, so they can actually all do the same thing. But let's say go back to a regular skybox here. So clear was one of them. So anyway, that's how you use the skybox, is you just type in the name, boom, you put it there. Global illumination operates in the same way. So you're going to click on your light, you're going to go show an element viewer light, and you're going to see here clear _GI, where _GI is the thing that you sort of, oops, let me just turn this down, where _GI is the, oh man, where is this located? Oh, okay. Anyway, so _GI stands for global illumination. So what you want to do, right, is you're going to just, keep the underscore GI there because you don't need to type it more than once. You type in the thing that you want, Nimbus, right? So let's just say we chose Nimbus for our skybox. So let's go back here, type in Nimbus. So in global illumination light, right? So we typed in Nimbus underscore GI. This gives you the global illumination for the Nimbus skybox. And you can keep going with this. You can type in, I don't know, Cumulus. Let's see what Cumulus is like. Cumulus. Yeah, so let's see what this looks like. And looks pretty good. So you can see, like, this is the Cumulus skybox with the Cumulus global illumination on it. So anyway, that's how that works. You don't really want to change any of this stuff at all. You just leave it alone. That's the best advice, is just leave it be. So anyway, that's the basic sort of global illumination that's on by default. In addition to this, you have what's called global illumination background, which is just this single idea in extension. So it extends all the way out to the edge of the map, so to speak. It has a little less shadow fidelity, which is why it's a separate light. But same idea here, just type in, what is it? What did I type? Cumulus. And by the way, you want to make sure that the element viewer actually accepted your thing. So you just double check it, make sure it accepted. And there you go. That's your light in the background. If you are not satisfied with the amount of light, you could just crank that up if you want. So I cranked that intensity up a little bit, see what it looks like. Yeah, looks all right. So anyway, that's the global illumination background. It's just an extension of the global illumination. The third thing, so I'm skipping this thing called stacks for now, but the third thing is called global fog. So what this does is it's the same exact thing as everything else. It uses the same sort of setup and systems. What it does is it produces a 360-degree sort of field of fog, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's all around the map there. And also it's color accurate, and this is what separates it from the fog on camera sort of thing. It's color accurate to the whole shit. So you'll have it's whiter over here and it's bluer over here, teal in the middle. I can actually disable these to show you that that's true. You can see the sky, you can see the fog here, how it's doing. I'm actually gonna levitate up with the standard camera so you can see what it looks like with samples on. Let's just let that load. So there you go. That's your fog and what it looks like from up top. So the way to use your global fog is you don't touch anything. If you want to actually adjust the level of how much fog there is, I actually forgot exactly what you have to tweak here, but I believe it's volume intensity. Use that to increase, decrease. Yeah. There you go. Volume intensity. You don't want to go overboard, but you can if you want. So anyway, the thing you want to change, right, is you go to you click on it, show an element viewer light, and you click this and you change this to, what are we using right now? Was it Cumulus? Underscore F is the thing that denotes the fog system. So anyway, make sure that the element viewer actually took that. So go to show an element viewer light. So as you can see, that's the bug with the element viewer. It didn't actually take it. So you're going to type it in again. And there, now it took it. Okay. So, as you can see, everything sort of changed here. And now we have our cumulus. This is our cumulus thing. Let me show you something that's a little more obvious to see. Orange. So there you go. That's the orange fog. So underscore F is your fog system. Okay. So let's change this back to cumulus, right? Probably going to change it back to clear. Now something to notice. Man, it is getting close to being late, so I kind of want to wrap this up. But man, there's not enough time. Not enough time to wrap this up. So anyway, I'm going to talk about the stacks now. Oh, real quick, ground illumination. This is the same sort of idea. Let me go back to Earth here. Ground illumination is just the same thing, but it's from the ground. There's no textures, no special magic going on with it. It's just a white texture that illuminates from the ground up. It's just a bounce light pretty much. And yeah, there's nothing special about it. You can actually do special things with it, as in, like, you know, what you're supposed to kind of do with the ground illumination is you're just supposed to select, oh, that's funny. This is supposed to be sand, not sand. By default, it's supposed to be white. So by default, you know, it's supposed to be this white color. Oh, whoops. That's why it was all messed up. Did this not do the... Yeah, so it is by default white. Okay. I don't know. That was just weird. I don't know why I didn't see it differently. Anyway, so yeah, by default it's on white. But you can change this to the color of the actual texture that you're using. So here I'm using... There's a desert, right? So you would change it to sand. And that'll actually change the color of your ground illumination to the sand texture. So you can actually increase this. You can actually see the sand color. You don't have to change any colors or anything. You get the exact color of the actual thing on the ground. And that goes for anything. So if you have grass, right, that'll give you this green color. And so there you go. That's the grass bounce lighting there. So anyway, that's how that works. So that's the ground illumination and global fog. And now the final thing I'm going to talk about here is the stacks system and how that's supposed to work. So this is one of the new things that just came with the update, right? Is this thing called stacks. And what this does is it basically puts the global illumination system on drugs, on steroids. So the global illumination, right, the way that it works, you know, you have 1,000 samples. That'll give you the most clarity in terms of... that'll give you like the most clarity, so to speak, with what you're doing. Let me just disable that and this. So yeah, so with 1,000 samples, you know, it takes a bit of time to do this, but it will give you some good coverage, right? But it only produces 1,000 samples for you. What the stacks does is it uses a clever technique of rotating the whole shit around the skybox while also so you rotate it, but then you rotate the texture itself. And what this does is it actually produces unique samples, which is pretty interesting. So what that does is what you want to do is you want to turn off your global illumination, and then you want to turn on your stacks system. And this will produce 8 times the amount of samples for your global illumination. So if you let it load here, you'll actually notice that the clarity of everything actually goes up by a lot. So from 1,000 samples to 8,000 samples. And this will really help you if you're making a scene build that has windows or something, and you have light pouring in. The 1,000 samples will scatter pretty easily. But with 8,000 samples, all that detail gets filled in. And the stack system also allowed for this whole thing about consolidating the lights together so that it can include the sun, because the sun also sort of is limited by the number of samples that actually exist on the light. So so that actually increases the fidelity of these shadows produced by the sun in this lighting system. And so yeah, you'll get better clarity by using the stack system. And now also what the stack system tends to do is that you can actually lower this to 64 samples, and that's equivalent to about 500 samples. And this, because it takes advantage of SFM's parallel processing, you can actually preview your session a lot faster. So you can see I can preview this now in less than a few seconds, whereas before with the single global illumination light, it would have taken 30 seconds to preview. So anyway, I'm going to leave this on 64 because that's all I really need. 64 samples, I mean, and leaving the stack system on. Also, something to mention about the stack system is you want to go into when you want to, once you've picked a skybox and you've settled on the idea, on the thing that you want, that's when you go into this, into the light, right? Show an element viewer light, and you type in the name of the skybox and it'll have GI0, right? On the next one, you'll have GI45. Next one, you have GI90, and so on in a circle till 315. So yeah, so those are all here, and you want to change all 8 of them to the skybox that you chose. Obviously, you don't want to keep going back and forth. You know, you want to just pick a global illumination with this. Once you've settled on a sky that you like, then you go on to using stacks and using the stacks system to not only boost your preview render times and stuff like that, but to also get that 8,000 sample clarity, you know. So let me change my global fog here to, okay, so these are all good. You want to keep your global illumination background on. It's not connected to the stack system, but because you don't exactly need all that clarity from that far away. So anyway, so that's global illumination, what it does. Extremely powerful tool. You want to use it for as much as you possibly can. Man, I only got 20 minutes to wrap this up. Okay, so in the internal tools, don't touch this. Just leave it alone. I wonder if I can actually delete this. I'm not sure. Probably not. You should leave this alone. Don't touch it. Yeah, no, you can't touch it. So just leave that as is. You want to disable. So, okay. This global illumination is for exteriors, right? For interiors, right, there is a similar system that uses the same sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my references and switch to my simple room. And so this, the global illumination interior uses a similar system, but it's simplified a lot more, if that makes sense. Basically, every texture is white. So if you go to each and every one of these, so it's actually equivalent to a 6-sided box. But what you want to do is, if you want to actually utilize global illumination for an interior, is you'd want to take a panorama of the inside of where your interior is. And then you'd have to section it off into the different, you'd have to do some Photoshop work to cut the materials up into textures that you like. And then they have to basically approximate the whole circle, the whole sphere, I mean. How that's done, it's a little complicated. That's why everything is just defaulted to white. You don't exactly have to worry too heavy about those details, but this actually operates on its own as just regular white textures, as good lighting for an interior. And what you would actually do is you would just change the light's texture to something that matches the thing that you have. So if your thing is metal, right? So if you decided to use metal on your scene building stuff, then use the metal texture, you know, that kind of lighting. Use the metal to influence the lighting there. So yeah, that's the global illumination. It is the same thing as the regular illumination, just, you know, for interiors, pretty much. What you want to do is you also want to adjust your, like, say you have a room like this, right? And you made a wall or something, right? And the wall is like this or whatever. Let's just say I disabled all that. So you see how the light doesn't reach? So here it reaches, and then boom, it doesn't reach anymore. What you want to do is you don't really want to move this, although you can. You move it until it actually activates like that, and you want to make sure you're using pinpoint accuracy. You can also use actually, yeah, that's how you really want to use it. You just want to boop, you just want to boop it like that. Make sure you get exact coordinate data here with your stuff, so that you're not getting any artifacts. But yeah, that's if you have a wall that's not, man, the fuck? Where's my undo button? Okay, I'm just undoing so I can go back to where I was. Okay, so yeah, that's the global illumination interior, and moving that around. You don't actually have to rotate this. In fact, you'll get funny business happening if you rotate it. So just leave the rotation alone. You just move this around, right? You just move this around if you want. Change the textures, and boom, you're set. You're good to go. That's how the global illumination interior works. Now I'm going to rush through these, but the point lights, I'm going to disable global illumination. The point lights are each of these things are point light techniques. They're all hooked up to a similar system as global illumination, where you just have an element that you move around and you rotate the element itself. You don't actually, you can go like this if you want. You don't have to do that with the high quality version, which is just 6 point lights together. 6 lights, 6 spotlights stuck together. But yeah, so yeah, that's how this is all hooked up. Man, I'm gonna have to split this into 2 parts, man. This is crazy. This is taking this long. So yeah, that's hooked up to this, and this takes up 6 lights. So 6. So computationally, it takes up a lot of resources. But it is the highest quality light, so to speak, and this is what makes it. So this is what you want to use when you want something up close and you want detail up close to something. And you want it to have decent shadows up close, so to speak. This is the tool that you want to use for that. So just to undo. So that's the high quality point light. Also, by the way, you're not going to want to use this point light itself. You're just going to want to copy everything like that. And then you're going to paste it, you'd want to paste it instead. And then hook them all together yourself and then move that. That way you have the template for it, that way you don't fuck with the template. Excuse me. That way you don't fuck with the template. You have whatever you copied. So let's delete that. So the next point light method is called the point light non-animated, which is another point light method which uses 2 lights stuck together. And now this is the reason that this is here is because this is the thing that you're actually going to use the most, because it's not borked in terms of like the animated point lights. So that's why it's called point light non-animated. But the thing is, you have to use it in a certain way. You can't just put it anywhere you want. You have to actually build around it, so to speak. You have to sort of build carefully with it when it comes to scene builds. The way that the light actually behaves is based off of like where the 2 intersect. So like I can actually show that to you by going like this. No, does that not work? Wow, that doesn't work. That's crazy. All right, well, I was trying to show how, oh, maybe it's the FOV? No. Okay, you can kind of see it on the sides. You see how it's stretching the shadows here? It's because the actual texture is a box and not the whole screen. And so everything outside of the box is actually panning out to infinity or stretching out to infinity. And so that's why the shadows look distorted like that. And so, yeah, so because of that whole shadow distortion thing that goes on at the edges of those lights, you actually have to sort of carefully rotate these in such a way or place them where there's non-intersecting geometry. So for example, like here, there's nothing intersecting the line in which they cross. And so you actually have good shadows on everything, but you had to slant it a little and you had to move it around. That's what I mean by placing it carefully. That's how you're supposed to use those lights. Anyway, these are the lights that you're going to use the most. And the lights you're going to use the least, but it's still here because it's still pretty cool, is the animated light, which you're going to use these. They're the least computationally, pressing on your system. But the thing is, they mess up your motion blur. samples and stuff. So they mess up your motion blur, as in they just, it causes a flickering, and the flickering is just, it's pretty terrible. So you don't exactly want to put it in front of the camera. You want to put it somewhere in the distance or something, as a sort of decoration in the distance kind of thing. And that's even if you want to use shadows for something in the distance like that. Anyway, that's the thing you're going to use the least. As you can see, it's called animated because there's animation samples that go with these kinds of lights. And what they actually do is they animate the light in a circle, both in each direction. So anyway, that's what that's what an animated point light is. So anyway, those are all the light setups here. You copy these, you copy what you need and you paste them. With global illumination, you leave everything alone. All you got to do is change the textures, maybe the intensity here or there with one of the lights, but for the most part, you don't touch anything. You just change textures and that's it, and you're set. So anyway, that's why by default it's on. And so I'm going to turn it back on and turn off my simple room. Let's enable this. And okay, so this is what my thing looks like right now. It's actually not correct because I'm using this here. I'm actually going to do this right now because I want to stare at it. I want to stare at this particular thing. So you'll actually see this process live. I'm kind of wondering if I should cut this video short. I hope I haven't been cutting out either, because I'm not exactly speaking into the microphone all the time. So yeah, this is the process of doing your stacks. As you can see, you got to do it over and over again until you get all 8 stacks. So an element viewer. Kind of wish there was like a hotkey or something for this, or a script even. That would be kind of cool. So I'm going back to check, and you can see like some of them didn't take. This is just a bug with element viewer. You just have to go back and you have to make sure they all took. Yeah, you have to go back and make sure they all took. So here, this didn't take. Now it took. That took. This didn't take, so I'm going to do that. And this didn't take, so now I'm going to do that. The last one didn't take, so I'm going to do it one more time. There we go, it took. Okay. That should be everything. Okay, so now what you want to go and do. Okay, so the next section is the environment setups. Man, I hope I can get through this pretty quickly. Let me see how much I have left to do. Camera setups, light setups. Oh god, I got like 6 more sections. Okay, so in environment setups, what you have are mostly so there's not much here, but the tool itself is pretty elaborate. So in your first section, you'll have tools, and by default it's on. And one of these tools is called the Scene Builder's Cube. The other is a placeholder for this model that has yet to be created, called the Terrain Plane, which is in similar design to the Scene Builder's Cube. But the Scene Builder's Cube, which is this here, you saw me using it earlier, but basically you can manipulate it in 3 dimensions. So you can stretch it in the y-axis, you can stretch it in the x-axis, you can stretch it in the z-axis. You can also shrink it down in each axis as well. And you can also create arcs with it by upping this X inward. So you can see there on the corner, actually creating a little arc. So I'm going to put it right there. Try to put it in front of the screen maybe. So there you go. You can see that it's actually creating little arcs for the thing. And it can do this in 3 dimensions as well. So you can also use these stereo things to produce shapes that are unique. So by unique, I mean like things like this, like a trapezoid. So this creates a trapezoid. This creates a whatever this is. I don't know what that is, but that shape. And you can combine the two to create pretty much any kind of shape you want. You can go on the other side and see what you get. So yeah, that's how, and yeah, so that's that's all the ways that you can manipulate the thing. It also has freedom in each of the 3 dimensions. So, for example, right, you can set this to the middle here. You can stretch this out, right, and then you can copy it, right, and then paste it, and then rotate it. Rotate it 90 degrees, and then you can move it so that it creates a little, I don't know, just you can basically, what the Scene Builder's Cube does is it creates geometry, and essentially it can create any geometry that you want. And if you want proof of my claims, I'm going to show you exactly what is possible to be made with the Scene Builder's Cube. Almost only the Scene Builder's Cube and nothing else. So I'm going to show you a picture of that now, of one of my most recent things. Okay, so here's something. Okay, all of these things are made with the Scene Builder's Cube. But this, let me see if I can find the picture. So this was all made with the Scene Builder's Cube back there. This was made with the Scene Builder's Cube, but not as good. This was made with the Scene Builder's Cube, and this was the example I was talking about. I made this the other day. This is all the Scene Builder's Cube. Everything is made with that cube. Let's see what else. So that's other angles of the thing. Let me see. Oh, this is also the Scene Builder's Cube. So yeah, you can make pretty much everything, anything and everything with that cube. Let me see if I can find. Here's other stuff. So this was from Films who used that Scene Builder's Cube recently. He made this thing with it mostly. This is another thing that I made that I've been making that uses just the Scene Builder's Cube. You can see this thing here is made with the cube only. This is the cube. Everything is just the cube. There's nothing else. So all of it is just manipulations of those parameters. Oh, this as well. Looks really good. These panels are actually the cube. The designs on the ground are the cube. Anyway, you use this cube to assemble any geometry that you want. You can see the curved windows as well. And that's what makes it an extremely powerful tool to use. And it's pretty much the only tool you're going to be using for the most part to make the geometries of your scene. And then you use props and the directional scaling script to sort of fit the rest of your geometry together. Something to mention is, what's it called? Let me think. Oh, right. So one of the things to mention about this cube is, or one of the reasons it's so powerful is if you look over here, it's got a beveled edge. Now, if you know anything about photorealism or Blender or whatever, and wondering how you actually get like photorealistic looking stuff, these edges here, beveled edges, is one of the reasons. And it's a little bit, it's not technical to explain why, but basically if you have light hitting this object, the beveled edge will catch the light really well. And this is something that you'll notice if you have Phong going on. So let me just turn it on here. Is it on here? No, it's not. Okay, anyway, so let me change the texture of this. I wanted to wait to change this texture, but let's just change it now. If I were to turn the Phong on, so you can see this Phong highlight here. I don't know if you can see that, but that Phong highlight is what gives it that very nice thing. So let me turn on this as well. And then you can see how it looks with the, let me turn this down. Basically the idea is to get, is for you guys to see this sort of edge thing going on. Let me actually make it bigger so you can actually see the edges. So this seems okay, I guess. But you can see that the light is catching the edges of this thing really well. And as you go to assemble stuff, that's how you can get the lighting to look really nice on, say, stuff like this, I suppose. The lighting really bounces off these soft edges everywhere. And it makes for a lot of good photorealism. These are low sampled lights here, but that's what it basically does. Or that's one of the reasons you want to use the cube over other models that don't have that feature. So, okay, I don't know if you noticed, but one of the things that I was doing was changing the texture of this cube, because the cube is hooked into the same system as pretty much everything else. So if you were to go to show an element viewer and clicked on model and went to materials and to change me, then you can go to these settings here, base texture, and you can change this to metal, right? What other thing can you think of? Logs is another one. So that'll give you logs. I think I showed this earlier. Cabin is another one. What else? Ice. I don't know, what's another texture? Grass is another one, so you can actually change it to a grass texture. These are all 4K Quixel assets, so they look good. So when you scale them up or whatever, that's what you'll see. Let me just do that. So that's your grass. Now, okay, so there's grass here, but also what you have is the bump map. So you can actually change this, and the bump map is denoted by a _n. So if you type in grass _n, you get the bump map to the grass. Same thing with, let's try metal again, because that you can actually see that metal n, and you can see that's the normal map to. Let's just turn that down a little bit. Turn this up a little bit. So, and yeah, that's the normal map to the metal surface here, and that'll give you some more realistic sort of bump mappiness going on, Phong reflections. That's the other thing is in order for this to actually reflect the global illumination, you actually want a little bit of Phong on your materials. So you can't exactly, you can see it here, but it's actually reflecting just like this sphere is reflecting. It's actually reflecting the skybox. So okay, next thing is the sliders, right? So Phong boost and Phong exponent, these are actually sliders. So I added that functionality there. Let's see what else. Let me just check some of my messages because I got some, I think. Oh, I got a ping. What you got for me? Oh, that was at 10 o'clock. Okay, cool. So I gotta link him the stuff so he can see it. And I'm gonna do that. I'm also gonna probably hang up this stream. Jesus Christ, 2 hours long. Anyway, a couple more features that this cube has is the ability to alter its base texture transform. So you're going to, in here, you're going to alter its size by going to these two values. So there's 16 boxes here. The two boxes that matter is this one and this one, okay? So you change this to 16, you change this to 16 or something, and boom, you can see that this actually got more refined, right? So just so you can see it better, what's something rock? So you can see that it tiled a lot more. So that's how you can increase the texture fidelity going on, is by using base texture transform and just affecting these two values to get you the thing that you need. And as you scale the your scene builders cube, you're going to be interacting with that feature to get the proper thing. So, you know, as you stretch this out to be a pretty big cube or something, that's when you want to use your base texture transform. Let's change this to rock _n. There you go. You got a little rock thing here with the proper scale. You can also change the color. This is self-explanatory. Change it to whatever color you want. And by default, it's on 0.5. And so yeah, so that's the scene builder's cube. It can do a lot. This was actually made before the directional scaling script, so we were using this thing before that thing showed up. But the scaling script actually helps augment this whole system by making it possible to fit, props together and things like that. So let's see. I'm gonna return this now to default. So that's the tools. So that's the scene builder's cube tool. And now there's 3 other tools here, which are called projection tools. And I promised I would actually talk about these, but there's like no time left to really talk about this. It's kind of getting late for me, so I don't want to wake up my neighbors, and they get pretty upset when they hear me talking. So I know it's kind of dumb, but that's New York City. Anyway, so in these there's 3 projection methods here. So I'm going to save this. And what you want to do is, just like everything else, you want to disable your stuff. I'm actually going to disable both of those. And then you want to disable this. Disable your references. And now you're going to enable projection model. And this will bring up the projection stuff. I think this is hooked up to the standard camera. That's right. So if I were to move the standard camera around, you can see my projection model actually. Man, this is trippy. Why is it only moving in one direction? Crazy, man. I guess it's just uniformly in all directions. That's crazy. Anyway, yeah, so I don't know if you saw that, but projection is just you take some video from some other game. You make sure that you shoot it at a particular FOV or whatever. And then in SFM, you take that, you turn it into a texture, an animated texture, and then you match the FOV of the camera of SFM to the camera in the game. And you can get this sort of thing where you can project the information. So basically, you match the two. You're basically matching the perspective of the two things, and it lends to the selling of that effect. These projection things were made specifically for Cyberpunk, because that's the workflow I was going for with that shit. And they've persisted. They were like one of the first sort of tools that I was looking into. Anyway, that's why they persisted and are here for people to use. Anyway, the projection model light is what enables the light onto the projection. You don't really have to change this, but if you increase it, it actually just makes it brighter. There's nothing special about the lights. You just, the projection model is the thing. So anyway, if I play this, you notice that it's actually, you can tell it's an animated texture. Pressing the play button, you can see the grass moving. The sign is actually moving over there. That just kind of shows that it's an animated texture. And that's how this is what you want to use in terms of doing projection stuff. There's a second method called projection lighting method, which is the same thing, except instead of using a model, it uses a light. And if you were to move your camera around, okay, it's the same story, but pretty much what's happening is that, let me see if I can enable one of these characters here. So anyway, if you were to match up the FOVs here, it would be something like this or whatever. Like, this is what I'm talking about. You match up the FOV like that. You're supposed to use little tools to help you align things together. But essentially that's what it does. Let me just enable this maybe, so you can see. So it's not perfect, but that's kind of the whole idea behind this concept of projection. Is you're supposed to, that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to align it properly, and use it for that kind of thing. I have a whole sort of slew of examples of me using this projection method to do Cyberpunk. I'm not really going to go too much into it right now. Maybe I'll just show some examples. In fact, I will do that right now. Let me see if I can find something. Let's see. Well, storyboard. I actually have motioned scenes, but you can see some pictures instead. So I actually use it here. So in this one, so in this picture here with Dwayne Johnson, this is from the actual Cyberpunk game. You know, what I did was just matched up the FOVs, making sure all the lines are the same with the FOV of the camera, and then it'll actually look like he's there in the city, you know. And you integrate it with your own scene build, you know, like in that example. Let's see if there's another one I can look at. There's another one here. So there's some here. This is, let me go to this to find a good example. Okay, so they're in the car here, right? So this is actually an image of the street, and this is a car interior in the scene build. Anyway, this is all using those exact methods of taking animated textures and putting them together. So that's what that's what the whole purpose of those stuff is. So did this disappear? Okay, I disabled it. So that's what both of those methods do. The last one is the coolest one, obviously, but it's called the interactive projective environment, projected interactive environment. Now, here's the thing. It's not exactly done. I mean, it is kind of done, but it's not perfect. It's not a perfect method. Not perfect method. It's not, there's still problems with it. So it's never left a kind of beta stage, you know? But the whole idea behind it was that you could, in principle, make that 2D image into a 3D interactive thing, like almost like a, I don't know. I don't know the exact word for it, but basically the whole idea surrounds, you know, getting a kind of light catcher shadow thing against a flat image. So if I were to show you what this actually is, it's actually just a flat image, and it's projected in such a way where it looks like she's actually there. Let me see if I can make this look a little cleaner. Probably not. I don't know why it's so fucking bright. Did I make this like super bright for no reason? I think that's just how it is. I don't know. Sometimes I fuck around with the stuff and I don't remember to put it back. So, but anyway, this is kind of just the idea behind it was these are your horizon line helpers. These are supposed to help you find the FOVs of both cameras and to line them up, which involves lining up parallel lines to each other from the thing in the game to the FOV of the camera. And yeah, so that's what all these tools are sort of for. You have your projective camera, you have the light that casts the image onto the back panel. Then you have your fill light, which just fill light on camera, which, you know, fills in the rest of that light. Maybe this is just too bright or something. Yeah, let's just make it this bright. I don't know why it was so fucking bright. Set it to default. I don't know, just make it like that. Oh, there's radius going on. So anyway, you're supposed to fix all that stuff so that everything looks good. The light on camera, so yeah. Projection surfaces is, what is this? Oh, this is the back plate. So that's the plate in which the light is projecting onto. The perspective alignment tools are these two things. You move them around and you line them up with where the horizon is. So to do that, you actually take this red arrow, you go like this, boom, and it takes you right to the horizon line. And you use that horizon line. That tells you exactly where the horizon of the photo is, of your camera, I mean. And you basically align the photo's horizon to the horizon of your own camera. So that's how you do that. Basically, these two lines have to be parallel. That's how that works. Light and shadow. Now, using this interactive thing, basically there is a shadow light and a regular light. So this shadow light creates the shadow on the floor. This regular light creates the light. And then it's supposed to cast a weak shadow It's kind of flawed. It uses a flawed method, so I'm not going to go too much into it. And then reference items, that's referring to this. But anyway, you can see that in motion, she goes in motion. And now if you actually let this render, you'll see it's actually three-dimensional. So you can see like, let me disable this. You can see it's three-dimensional in the sense that you have blur in the foreground and then you have blur in the background, and the two things are, and she's unfocused, or she's focused, I mean. So that's kind of the magic behind this whole 3D projective thing, that the whole idea behind it. But anyway, that's how that works. It's a really cool tool. Hopefully it works fully someday. Okay, so those are all the setups. There's a lot of setups. There's a lot of stuff in the tool. I tried to go through that as fast as I fucking could. Let's see, what else is there? Okay, just to go through really the rest of this stuff real quick, is we have the references section, which is, enable my lighting again. So in the references section, what you have, right, is the reference character. So when you open your session, that's what you'll see is your reference character, along with a template terrain, and then the Fong sphere, as well as your cubes, which I moved actually. So let me put the cubes back. Let me move this cube back to where it was. I can remember where it was. No idea what the coordinate is. Make this 50. Nope. Negative 50. And then this is 0. Yeah. All right, so that's where, so this is what you see when you open up the session. You're going to see your reference character, which is supposed to act as your height reference. So I put 5'6". Use that as your reference to how you make how large you make things, and just base it based off of how you would make things in the real world in terms of measurements. So if you're 5'6" and the ceiling is 8'11", stick 2 5'6" characters together to get 8 feet 11. If you have a table, the table goes up to your crotch area, and if you're 5'8", then you know that the table is going to go about 2 inches above the crotch area. So that's just an example of how to use your height reference to do proper scaling of objects. The next thing is the Fong sphere. You're supposed to use this as a Fong reference to make sure your global illumination is working, which it does, of course, here. And also for Fong references, lighting references, that's what you want to use this Fong sphere for. The showroom floor is actually just a showroom floor for showing things off. The water plane is also a useful tool. It's made from the cubes. It's made from cubes. It's just a water plane with all the technology involved in it. And then so then you'll also see your simple terrain template, and then the simple room, which is what I showed earlier with the interior global illumination stuff, and your flares and bokeh tests. So this is to test your bokehs and your flares to make sure that they're on and they're working properly. So that's what your reference section is for, is to house these. But also what you want to use your references for is when you're making scene building stuff, so you're making scene builders cube or whatever, you want to create textures that you like and surfaces that you're interested in, so, like say you have, you make a metal thing, and oh, by the way, I forgot to mention that you can actually mix and match these bump maps and base textures to get arbitrarily large number of combinations. So there's that aspect to it. Anyway, you make a bunch of different cubes. Maybe some of them are different colors because you want to have a different color palette, like you want to make a certain color palette or something. So there's an example. So here's my 2 cubes. You can fit these into your references group, and that's what they're for. They're to house your references, and you can mute all your references. You use them. You're like, oh, okay, so those are my references. Then you just copy what you need, and then you're off to make whatever scene build using your references, you know, so that you're not always making new shit and arbitrarily. So let's just delete those. That's what the references are kind of for, why that section's there. For workflow purposes, yeah, that's what they're for. So okay, the letterbox. Oh, the overlays, right? So one cool thing about all this stuff is that the anamorphic lens overlay is no longer a thing, so you don't need to worry about it. The overlays that are here is you got your 21:9 letterbox. This is for doing movies. So mute, unmute, there you go. It's just a letterbox, that's why it's there. Color banding fix, I'm not going to explain too much about this, but it fixes banding that comes from volumetric lights. The color clipping fix fixes the curves, the color correction curves. He's live streaming it right now. Oh, no, I'm not live streaming. What I'm live streaming is a tutorial that I'm making for the team. I actually still have this session template that I have to send to you. Why did my memory just shoot up to 2900? What the fuck? What the hell? What did I do? My memory just shot up for no reason. No, yeah, so I'm making this tutorial literally for making it now because I'm not gonna explain why I'm making it, but anyway, let me just do what Melvin said. I haven't released the master session template yet. I'm just making a tutorial for it. And I decided it should be a stream. So, oh my God. All right, let me send this. See, Melvin, okay, let me just do this in the middle of this. Did. Okay. So here you go, Melvin. That's the link to that. Man, I wish I could talk to him right now because there's something he needs to know about this shit. Man, this redesign to this shit is terrible. It's like so laggy. Okay, give me 1 sec. By the way, Melvin, when you put these into the user mod, no, not user mod, when you put these into your games folder, so make sure you rename your older ones to system don't overwrite anything in your current projects. Right, as an installation procedure, if you already have these tools, then they will overwrite shit. If you've used the older tools, like if you've had the older things, you don't want to overwrite stuff if you've got a project, if you're in the middle of a project, because there's been a lot of changes to the thing. Okay, so where was I? Okay, last fucking thing, okay, is, and I don't know why my memory is so high, are these two clips at the very end, at the 60-second mark. So you'll see this is shot 1, right? You go all the way to the end. Panorama, there's this shot called Panorama Probe 6 side and 8 stacks probe 8 side. 8 stacks probe, I mean. This is actually meant as a procedure for exporting out your stuff in a fast, so exporting things out, a panorama. So what you would do is if you need a panorama for something, you would go to your panorama sphere here. You click on the show an element viewer and you go to the panorama in question. So I don't know, just for example, you have this panorama. Then you go and you export this. So disable lighting or enable lighting. Just make sure your panorama probe light is on. But yeah, you can disable lighting and then you export this, only this clip, right? So you would go to File, Export, Movie, selected shot, and it'll export only these things. So these 6 frames, and it'll actually what it'll export is you can see each frame is a side of the thing. Also, you want to make sure you disable your motion blur. You don't want that on when you do that. So it'll export these 6 sides, and that's how you would get a 6-sided panorama, which you might need for something. Like there's reasons you'd need this for stuff. Same story with stacks, right? So to produce the stacks, you can do this sort of thing. Now I decided to do the stacks manually because I found that easier, given I was using HDR textures, EXR I mean, and it's just there's no easy way to do it like from with SFM like this, but it was here and it's here anyway for you to use if you want to create your own stacks for your own light skyboxes and stuff. What you would do is you would go again, do the same thing, change this texture to I don't know, just some skybox, and it will rotate it in a circle, and it will take pictures of each of them, and then you turn those pictures into textures, and then you do the stacking sort of procedure. These were made for me, of course. Obviously, I made these for myself, but they're here if somebody else wants to make something like that. Again, these procedures, they're very, they can be pretty complicated, the procedures. So I try not to burden anyone else with them. But anyway, okay. So that was the master template session. As you can tell, it's a lot just condensed into all of this stuff. And it took, Jesus Christ, 2.5 hours just to talk about this shit. And this is why I made the tutorial, because I was getting tired of explaining it every fucking time on the phone. Because, man, I've explained it like 10 fucking times by now. So, anyway. I have one more thing here, which was to show a workflow example, which I'm not going to do because I don't have the time to do it. But I'm just going to show you real quick how, when you open the session, this is what you're supposed to do, right? You open the session, you click on your UFMC directional scale patch, and then you go to pick a camera, right? So if that's standard camera, you do that. But let's just say we picked our anamorphic camera for now. And now this is what you want to use, right? By the way, what you're going to see is you're going to see this, you're going to see these things enabled by default. So anyway, you use your RT camera, right? You position it wherever you want. Maybe, what I would suggest is rather than just picking the RT camera, you pick your standard camera because it's just easier to navigate it around so that you're not switching between things. But anyway, you can use your RT camera, right, to just start off with. You swap to your anamorphic to take looks at it or whatever. Once you identified the kind of camera thing that you're going to do, then you would go to your lighting setups, make sure you're choosing the right skyboxes that you want. So, you'd go to skybox. I don't know, what is this, cumulus? So I'm not going to change everything, but you go into your skybox, you change it to cumulus. Same thing here, you change this to cumulus. Right now I have my stacks enabled, but you would choose a skybox with your global illumination on, and Once you're satisfied, then you go and you enable your stacks. So you guys saw me do that earlier. So I already did all that. I swapped everything over to Cumulus Clouds. And let me see. I'm going to change this also to Cumulus. And my fog should also be Cumulus. So let's change that as well. Make sure that it takes. So I'm going to go to that light again and make sure that it took Cumulus. There we go. So now my stuff, my fog should be accurate there. I can preview it with my anamorphic camera. So it's like, okay, cool. So I'm satisfied with my lighting. I got my stacks enabled. So I would change my samples to 64. And then that way I can just quickly preview what I need to see. So now, let me just message Melvin. Streaming a tutorial. I haven't put it out yet. Sent it over to you, Melvin. Don't want Melvin to think I like said, you know, that I decided to just, oh, fuck it, you know, because that's not what I did. I'm just making a tutorial because I needed to make one. And I needed to make it 2 days ago, but decided to make it today. Just so I could release it tonight, but whatever. Okay, so anyway, so once your light setups are set up, then, you know, so my global illumination is all set up. I'm satisfied, right? Now what I do is I would go to my tools. I would take my scene builders cube. I'd copy and paste it. And then you can just disable your references and then you can just get started working. So I can take this cube. Let's see. I'm going to change it to metal. And then, yeah, rock. Cool. So I extend it out, build a little, I don't know, let's build a wall or something like that. And then, long story short, you're going to build your scene build. So that's how that works. And then, oh, by the way, even before building it, you know, let's just say I wanted to just explore, like, okay, cool, I want this metal texture. Then I want, I don't know, let's just say I want logs, right? So logs n. And so I want this texture too. But I need to change this to 1 or something. And I want to turn down the Phong boost a little bit because it's wood. So you don't want too much Phong on wood. So there you go, that's your wood texture. So you basically make sure that your textures are like the way that you want them first on your cubes. You know, you pick your color palette and stuff. So like, let's say I want some like this, where I want the materials to be metal N, and then I want something orange colored. So 3, 2, 1. Oh, that's like a milky white. Okay, I mean, that's fine. 3, 1.5. There you go, orange. So there you go. That's my sort of things, and I can save these as references. So I can actually rename them to reference cube 1, reference cube 2, or whatever. Put them in references, and then, you know, now I have my cubes. I have my tools or whatever. So I can actually disable my tools, then pull from my references. So I can actually enable them, pick what I want, disable them. You can also just disable individual references if you don't want to see those all the time. So that's what the group is for. It's for pulling out, it's for putting your references in places for quick access to whatever you create. So yeah, that's the workflow. Then you end up building something with this. So you build a wall, you know, you build something with it, with some windows. Maybe you build a little house or something. And then at the end, right, you just make sure that as you're building it, you're just making sure your global illumination is like looking tight. You know, you make sure like, you know, so that's for an interior, for example, right? So yeah, so that's for an exterior. Let's just say you wanted to make an interior. You would do a similar process, except you'd use a terrain plane, right? Which is just, it doesn't exist yet. But what you would do in the meantime is you'd take this simple terrain in your references, and you can use exactly this. You know, if you want to make a desert with hills, then you could just use this and just rotate it around or something. Um, but you can also just change this to something like grass, and you got yourself a grass plane. You can use these templates as well to just make what you want to make the thing. Grass N, to change it to a grass normal map. Grass N, and then there you go. And now you have a grassy sort of area zone that you can use for stuff. And now these grassy zones or whatever, they actually use the scaling script. So if you want to say, let's just say you made it smaller, right? Just say you made it just slightly smaller than this. You can scale it up. Let me set it to default. Let's just say we wanted to make mountains or something. So we'll go like this. Just say we wanted to make some really wacky mountains. So there we go. There's some mountains. Push it all the way in the back. You can also just get an actual mountain model, but whatever. Just push those mountains to the boundaries there. Let's see. By the way, I'm wondering where my where's my terrain? It's supposed to both be here. Oh, I'm an idiot. I got rid of my terrain. Yeah, that's my fault. I got rid of my terrain. Anyway, this would be your mountains or something. You wouldn't be an idiot like me and delete your other terrain, but you'd use this as like a mountain range or something, push it in the back. Take your advantage of your direct scaling stuff. But anyway, that's how you would do a scene build. That's how you would use this scene build, is just everything is already set up for you, and that's pretty much it. Like, it's not much more complicated than that. So that's like the workflow, is you pick your camera that you want to use. And based on what you picked, right, for your camera, it might be more or less of a challenge to use them, right? What I would suggest is you just make sure, like, if you're doing something crazy like adding blooms and shit, try to save that stuff for after you've decided what you want to do. Mostly because you don't want to just be constantly changing vectors all the time. Not vectors, but changing settings all the time, you know? You kind of just don't want to do that. But you can if you want to. You can see how it looks with all the pretty stuff. So, no, this doesn't look great, but there you go. So, now, I think that will be the end of this tutorial. And I believe that's everything. I hope so. So I hope everyone, I hope my teammates watch this mess of a tutorial that I made. I'm not exactly good at making tutorials. I'm really good at talking, but not really making tutorials. So I appreciate everyone who kicked into this, tuned into this, I mean. And I'm going to be sectioning off the video into all the individual parts so that people can just read it to the part that they need. and hopefully that won't take too long. So yeah, what else is there? I guess usually this is when I ask people if there's any questions. Let me just check YouTube real quick, see if there's any chats. No, there is no chats. So good, there's no questions for me to answer. Anyway, peace, y'all. I bet you that any money that there's something that I forgot. So let's hope that I didn't forget anything.